You ever think you're done with the chaos, like truly done, and then out of nowhere, life grabs you by the collar and says, "Not so fast"? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. It was 6 in the morning. The sun had just started crawling over the Arizona horizon, and I was standing barefoot by my horse pond, sipping coffee and watching thunder and lightning. My two oldest wade into the water like they owned the place. And honestly, they kinda did. After 25 years with Border Patrol and losing my wife to cancer, this little routine, this quiet patch of land, was my therapy. 40 acres outside of Tucson. Passed down from my grandfather, complete with a spring-fed pond and 4 retired Border Patrol horses that were more family than livestock. And then, sirens. 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt like they were busting a drug ring, not pulling up to a ranch. And stepping out behind them, like she was directing a Broadway show, was Karen O'Hara, our neighborhood's HOA president. All 5 feet 2 inches of fury, armed with an iPad, a clipboard, and a freshly printed rulebook she probably slept with. She points straight at me like I'm public enemy number 1 and yells, "He's violating HOA Animal Code 7.4. These are working animals. Arrest him." Now, the cops looked about as confused as I felt. One of them took a cautious step forward and asked, "Sir, are these your horses?" I nodded. "Yup. Mine." "Well, technically, they're federal." The cop froze. "Wait, federal?" "Retired Border Patrol," I said, giving Thunder a pat. "Still tagged, still covered under Homeland Security protocol." That's when Karen's mouth clicked shut, like someone hit the mute button on a talk show host mid-rant. But see, this mess didn't start that morning. It had been brewing for weeks. When I moved back here, I honestly thought I was escaping all that high-stakes stuff. No more late-night surveillance, no more cartel busts, just horses, sand, and the occasional coyotes. I didn't expect neighborhood drama to escalate into federal security breaches and human trafficking operations, but we'll get there. It started simple. Karen marched onto my property a few weeks earlier in heels that had no business walking on gravel, waving her phone like a badge. "Mr. Walker," she said, according to revised HOA policy, "livestock must be approved by the board." I told her kindly, but firmly, that this property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. It hadn't been since my grandfather signed the federal easement back in the 60s. "Easement?" she scoffed. "This is a gated community. There is no such easement. You have 48 hours to remove these animals, or I'll have to escalate." Now, most folks would have laughed her off. But something in her tone, like she'd already decided the outcome, didn't sit right with me. I started paying attention. 2 nights later, 3 of my security cameras went dark. Not because of a storm or a short circuit. Someone had clipped the cables. I found tiny listening devices in my barn. Fresh tire tracks near the rear fence. I'd seen this before: covert ops. Professional surveillance. But in all my years with Border Patrol, I'd never expected it in my backyard. So I called in backup. Not the tactical kind, but smarter. Tommy Reyes. My neighbor 2 lots down is a software engineer. Quiet guy, 2 kids, keeps to himself, but sharp. I showed him the security footage, and within 20 minutes, he had a name: Rick Duvall. Private investigator. Fired from Phoenix PD for tampering with evidence. Currently licensed under a shell agency based in Nevada. And guess who hired him? Karen O'Hara. Now, I was more than just irritated. This wasn't about HOA complaints anymore. Someone had weaponized neighborhood drama into something surgical. Precise. Dangerous. That's when Maggie showed up. Maggie Harrington is 82 years old and the only person in that neighborhood who still remembers when horses outnumbered Teslas. She used to bring my grandfather pie every Sunday after church. She handed me a dusty manila folder and said, "Your grandfather didn't just own this land. He guarded it." Turns out, the pond and surrounding acreage had been part of a federal mounted unit training ground for over 50 years. Homeland Security had a standing agreement with my family. I wasn't just a retired border agent keeping some old horses. I was maintaining a classified federal asset without even realizing it. The documents, signed by DHS, dated back decades, included surveillance maps, training protocols, and, get this, active communication intercept nodes buried along the ridgeline. Karen had no idea what she'd stumbled into. Or maybe she did, because the next morning, I got a certified letter from her attorney. $5,000 in fines, accusations of illegal animal operations, and a threat to sue me into oblivion. That same day, Tommy called again. He'd found encrypted uploads from Rick Duval's laptop to foreign servers. The data included schedules, heat maps, even the horse's microchip scans. I called my old commanding officer, Agent Sarah Jennings. Her voice on the other end went from casual to code red in under a minute. "We've had chatter," she said. "Human trafficking. Intel leaks. Someone's using local surveillance to plan route bypasses." And the cherry on top? Karen scheduled a press conference. That's right. She invited the news to my property to protest what she called federal overreach and animal endangerment. She stood in front of cameras and said, "This man bathes his horses in our shared water supply every morning at 6 a.m. He thinks he's above the law." She didn't realize that by going public, she just confirmed to every trafficking cell watching the local news that this property was both federal and exposed. That night, I didn't sleep. I checked my perimeter, loaded my sidearm, prepped the horses. Thunder was already restless. He could sense it, same way he used to in the field. You don't forget that kind of training. At 5:55 a.m., I led the horses to the pond, like always. At 6:02, Dr. Melinda Clay from County Animal Welfare showed up, called in by Karen for an urgent abuse inspection. 30 seconds later, Karen arrived, flanked by Channel 5 News and what looked like half the HOA board. Karen started her speech, something about dignity and HOA justice, until Dr. Clay shut her down. "These horses," she said, "are in exceptional health. Federal records confirm they're part of Homeland Security's Retired Unit Care Program. And your photos?" She held up Karen's tablet. "Digitally altered. This is evidence tampering." Then, as if the universe wanted to make a point, a young girl came stumbling out of the desert behind my fence. Her clothes were torn, blood on her sleeve, and her eyes wide with something I'd seen too many times, pure, unfiltered terror. She collapsed near my boots, whispering in broken English, "Please, help." Maria Santos. That name hit me like a hammer. Maria Santos, daughter of Judge Emilio Santos of Mexico. He's been leading cartel prosecutions for over a decade. His daughter had been missing for 6 weeks. Karen, still live streaming, actually shouted, "This is staged. It's fake. They're trying to make me look bad." But the cops weren't listening anymore. They were on their radios. Border Patrol Tactical rolled in within minutes. 3 black SUVs, unmarked but unmistakable. Agents swarmed in, surrounded Maria, and immediately confirmed her identity. Maria had escaped from a trafficking convoy. She'd run all night through the desert and had recognized my horses from television coverage. She knew the uniforms, the markings, the pond. She had run here because it was the only place that felt like safety. And the traffickers? They were 15 minutes behind her. Federal agents secured the perimeter. Arrests were made at a nearby airstrip. Turns out, Rick Duval had been feeding intel not just to Karen, but to an international trafficking ring, using HOA surveillance to map federal patrol gaps. Karen had been an unwitting accomplice. When Agent Jennings placed her hand on Karen's shoulder and said, "You're being detained as a material witness in a federal investigation," Karen just deflated, like someone finally unplugged the ego she'd been floating on. 6 months later, a lot has changed. Karen cooperated. She testified. She got probation and, believe it or not, now works with a victim support group. Turns out, her son had died 2 years earlier in a car accident. She was just trying to control something, anything, to cope. Maria? She's back with her father. She's speaking out publicly about trafficking, about how sometimes safety doesn't come from big systems, but from a guy walking horses through water at dawn. And me? I didn't retire. Not really. I now run the Southwest Border Community Education Center right here on my grandfather's land. We train local law enforcement, educate communities, and yeah, Thunder and the boys still swim every morning at 6 a.m., only now they're joined by students, officers, sometimes even reporters. Turns out, the thing Karen tried to shut down became the thing that saves lives. So here's my question to you. What would you do if your neighbor went to war over something they didn't understand? Would you fight back? Stay quiet? Or turn it into something bigger than both of you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. Because sometimes, justice shows up on horseback. And sometimes, it starts with a Karen yelling about a pond. Either way, someone's got to tell the story. Might as well be us.